rowdy, wishing me heart it was Sunday. Drinking wine and beer all the week, time for whiskey on a Sunday. Well, hello everyone. You are all very welcome to join me for this latest installment of my Instagram live series, Whiskey on a Sunday, with me, Psalm for All. So as we're heading now well into the month of March, and we're continuing to count down to St. Patrick's Day, I mean, wow, can you believe it's only 10 days away? With all that in mind, I'm keeping with my virtual trek to the Emerald Isle, and this week I have two Irish whiskies that I'll be tasting and showcasing. Ishkabaha times 2. But before we dive into the whiskeys and talk about them, as always, I need to ask anyone who is watching this that may not yet be of legal age where they live to purchase, consume, enjoy alcohol. If that's the case, then I do need to ask you to say goodbye. Right. Okay. So for everyone else, let's begin. I'm going to start off by saying thank you again to the very fine folks at Cork Wines and Whiskies, an Ontario-based agent and purveyor of quality wines and spirits. Because of them, I'm able to showcase two Hyde Irish whiskey releases, the 1860 release and the 1916 release, both single grain Irish whiskies, but with some subtle differences between them. Now last week I talked about Hyde when I reviewed the 1938 release, and I mentioned that the Hyde brothers who were behind the whiskey, Alan and Connor, are actually bonders, right? They're not distillers. And I also mentioned that despite their last name also being Hyde, that their whiskey brand is actually named after the first president of the Republic of Ireland, Douglas Hyde. And just a quick reminder on bonding, right? Again, folks, it's certainly not a new phenomenon. Whiskey bonders were very prevalent and much revered in Ireland's deep whiskey history. And although they mostly disappeared in the 20th century, we're now seeing a revival of this very fine art. And I'd like to emphasize this, bonding is indeed a skill in and of itself. From choosing the right stock to purchase, planning the location of the warehouse, fine-tuning the blending formula if there is any blending going on, right through to the barrel choice that's being made to mature the whiskey. I mean, all of that takes skill. And in my opinion, a whiskey bonder that has whiskey, that whiskey is of no less quality or prestige than a whiskey that comes directly from a distillery who's doing their own bonding. So, if and when you do come across a bonded whiskey, because you may, it's starting to be a little more prevalent these days, I'm asking you to please don't hold any preconceived notions. Give it a try the same way you would a whiskey that comes from a distillery itself. You may just be very surprised and pleased with what you find. Okay, so back to the name, or rather who the brand is named after, right? Hyde. Who was President Hyde, you may be wondering? Well, if that's the case, Psalm for All is here indeed to fill you in. So Douglas Hyde, after which the whiskey is named, he was born in 1860 in County Roscommon, Ireland. And he was quite accomplished in his life. He became a lawyer and a scholar before he entered politics. And truthfully, funny enough, politics really wasn't his thing for many, many years. For a long time, he avoided anything political for a lot of his life. He was also president of the Gaelic League, which is an Irish cultural body, and he was a real staunch supporter of preserving Irish Gaelic language, a language that he learned as a child from native Gaelic speakers and for which he tirelessly championed for. In actual fact, it's due to Douglas Hyde that Gaelic was incorporated into the Irish education system back in 1913 and continues to be a part of learning curriculum to this day. So Mr. Hyde, in 1925, he joined the Irish Senate, and in 1938, he was unanimously elected as the first president of the Republic of Ireland, and he served out his full 6-year term. A few years after his term finished, however, in 1949, Douglas Hyde passed away. He left behind a very great legacy, especially again with regards to Irish Gaelic. It's also been said that his fierce support for the Irish language likely helped spark and revive the Irish Revolution that eventually led to Ireland becoming free of the hold that England had on it back in those days. And essentially allowed Ireland to become the republic that we know it is today. So in my opinion, quite an impressive individual. And for me, very easy to understand why the Hyde brothers chose Douglas Hyde as the face of their brand, right? Very important to Ireland. Okay, I can hear you all salivating through the airwaves and saying, great stuff, Paul, but come on, man, what about the whiskies? Right you are, so let's dive in. Now, as I mentioned earlier, both of the whiskies being tasted today are Irish single grain whiskies. And as we know from prior episodes, single grain means that it's a whiskey produced and bottled on the island of Ireland, right? Irish single grain means it's produced and bottled in Ireland. Irish single grain means it contains no more than 30% unmalted barley in combination of other cereal grains, which the other grain in this case is corn. And it's distilled via a column still type of distilling device, and it's all done only at one distillery. So those are the parameters for what single grain means, Irish single grain. So the first whiskey up, we're going to go to the Hyde 1860 release, aptly named in honor of the year that Douglas Hyde, the face of the franchise, was born. Now the stock for this whiskey is thought to be distilled from Cooley, and it was aged in charred first fill bourbon casks for about 6 years. And then here's something kind of different and cool. After it was in those bourbon casks for about 6 years, it was finished in former Burgundian red wine casks, believed to be Pinot Noir, for between 6 to 9 months. So, they took the whiskey and they threw it in some wine barrels to finish it up. So, kind of interesting. Let's give it a sniff and a taste. So we acclimatize our nose. Hi, how to meet you. Nice to see you. Hope you smell delicious. Okay, so the nose is now ready. Big deep sniff. What do we get? Well, despite it being 46% alcohol by volume, it's not boozy on the nose. It's ruby amberish in color, and it's very mild and soft on the nose. Up front, though, I do get, sweet red fruit, berry notes coming out. I get some floral orange blossom notes, some honey, red apple, little plum skin, getting a little custard, vanilla, a little toasted oak on the back, and if you dig deep, I'm getting just a little bit of dried coconut, so a little tropical. Interesting. Okay. On the palate, and remember, we take a sip and then we want to coat our mouth, get all our 5 flavor receptors firing. Okay. Quite creamy and soft on the palate. Flavors, getting a little cherry right away. Then some red apple. Little white pepper, just on the tip of the tongue. A little tingly. Soft red berry jams coming through. Some cereal notes, so grain cereal notes. Some hazelnut nuttiness. And now some spices, right? So clove, cardamom, and a little toasted oak on the palate. The finish, that lingering hazelnut tone is there. Some soft red fruit, cereal is coming through, and then again, just a little bit of oak rounding everything out on the palate. So what's my assessment? I think it's very intriguing and, to be honest, very nice. For me, this could easily be an after-dinner sipper. It's soft and it has that creamy mouthfeel. Yep, I think it's quite nice. Okay. Little sip of water and then on to whiskey number 2. All right, so whiskey number 2. This is the Hyde 1916 release, and it's named in honor of the 1916 Easter Uprising, which is where the Irish citizens, they kind of rallied around and they tried to seize control of Dublin, all in a bid to become an independent nation. Now, that didn't really work out in 1916, but those efforts did lay the foundation for events that would eventually allow for Ireland to become its own republic. So a very important date in Irish history. Stock for this whiskey, again, is thought to come from Cooley and was matured for approximately 6 years, but this time they used first fill ex-bourbon casks only. Also 46% alcohol by volume. So let's go in, we'll have a little sniff and a taste and see what we think. Bright gold in color. 1, 2, hope you smell delicious. Okay, now we're reset and we're ready. Okay. A little closed, mild intensity, so this is not punching you, punching you in the snoot, not at all. But I am getting caramel, I'm getting vanilla that's coming out. I get some fresh cream, I get some almond nuttiness, a little orange citrus. And then, we got to dig a little bit, but there's that cereal grain. Now I'm getting spices like cinnamon, clover coming through again. Little bitter wood char. So not, just that bitterness you get when you smell, charcoal. Little toasted oak. And now that it's opening up a bit more, I'm getting some corn and kind of bourbon-esque notes coming from it, which come from the barrel, of course. Okay, take a sip. Covered all those flavor receptors. Okay, it's different than the first one, I'll tell you that. It's a touch hot on the gums, if I'm being honest, and I think that's the 46% ABV, but it's already starting to tamper down. And I'm getting a little bit of zippy, chili, spicy heat on the tongue, and that's interesting. Yeah, not off-putting, but yeah, just it's spicy. Some sweet notes now are coming through, some buttercream, vanilla, a little red berry, butterscotch, sticky toffee pudding, those sweet notes coming through. A little marzipan now, honey, black pepper, and kind of just at the back end, just a hint of mocha. So not overly chocolatey, but I'm just getting a little powdered mocha kind of in the background. The finish, soft, but has that spicy heat to it. The cereal grain is coming through. And then, of course, that lingering sweetness that I was talking about. So what's my assessment of the 1916 Hyde release? Interesting and kind of fun, to be honest. For me, I think, though, that I would rather have this whiskey with a little bit of food, maybe with some honey roasted nuts or honey coated nuts, or maybe with just a little bit of cheese. Just something to help maybe balance the heat spice a little bit. I mean, again, it's not crazy spicy, but a little bit of cheese or something with a little sweetness on it, I think would help balance things out. But very, very intriguing on its own, I must say. So there you go. Single grains, and this is a good example of how two of the same whiskey types, and likely the same stock from Cooley, single grain, how that they can, be the same type but yet be matured differently, and then we can see how the influence of the wood can change the profile of the whiskey. So we can see, the effect of the casks, what they have on the whiskeys. So kind of a little fun exercise to do. All right, so back to the whiskeys themselves. If you liked what you've heard me describe regarding these two Irish whiskeys, and if you're wondering how you can find them, well, if you live in Ontario, the best place to ensure that you can find them is by visiting the website for Cork Wines and Whiskies, and it couldn't be easier. It's Cork Wines and Whiskies, spelt with a K-E-Y-S, right? Whiskies, WHISKEYS.ca. So go into your browser, put in corkwines-and-whiskies.ca. You'll find the website. You'll not only find these two Hyde releases there, but you'll also find a good selection of award-winning and hand-picked wines, whiskies, and spirits. And the good folks there will be happy to take your order. Pricing, The 1860 Hyde comes in at $85 Canadian per 700 milliliter bottle, while the 1916 release checks in at $70.92, again for a 700 milliliter bottle. In my opinion, that's pretty decent value for two interesting single grain Irish whiskeys that also have a little bit of age on them, right? I mean, we know that they're about 6 years old, so there's a little bit of age in there. We got to pay for that. Also, in Ontario, Irish single grain whiskey choices are very limited. And right now, as is most Irish whiskey selection, period. So for me, it's a lot of fun to get to taste something a little bit different. And again, decent value at those price points, in my opinion. If you are thinking about snagging either bottle, might I suggest that you don't delay too long, as with Hyde, what they do is they only release about 5,000 bottles per release globally. I know there is some stock in Ontario, but I don't think it's going to last for months and months, that's for sure. If you're in Quebec and you follow me and you're seeing this, the SAQ has very small quantities of each. The 1860 has an SAQ stock number of 134,45009. A bit more on the reasonable side at $60 a bottle, right? Taxations in provinces, that's the difference, but $60 for the 1860. The 1916 release, stock number 136,17472, and it lists for $59.75. Again, as in Ontario, they're 700 milliliter bottles, not 750s, but good value in Quebec if you can find them. For my US friends, for these two, quantities and pricing seems really to be all over the map from what I can tell. I think the best bet for you is to check your favorite online retailer or visit your favorite whiskey shop, local whiskey shop. I have seen some bottles online in the 62 to 65 USD range, but I've also seen stuff for much more expensive. So check in with your favorite shop to see really what it's all about price-wise for you. All right, well, all that said and done, folks, that's indeed a wrap for this installment of Whiskey on a Sunday with me, Sam Farrell. Whether you've watched this live on Instagram this Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or if you're catching this on the replay on IGTV, and if you are, just a gentle reminder, you just got to turn your device a little bit to see me the right way, because you can also catch this video on YouTube, and shooting in landscape is a much better experience. So Sam Farrell YouTube channel, you can find this here in a couple of days, and you can find all my prior videos there as well. I want to sincerely thank you for spending some time with me, regardless of how you found me and how you're watching. Please, folks, continue to stay safe out there. Please be well. And most of all, cheers from Sam Farrell.